resources will be provided if a the National Parks and Recs Association was resourced. We definitely suggest to tap into that resource to help us with this portion of our work. The Parks Department gets 10% of the concessions where they do have concessions in their parks, and that is funneled specifically to help with upkeep of the parks. Found that interesting. They recommended that request for proposals be sent for anyone interested in using the parks, as well as a focus group or survey to kind of get information from outfitters and or food trucks, etc., any of those potential future partners, to figure out how they would like to use the space, so we can consider that in our planning. We have done that in the past, kind of thrown that into other opportunities, but I think a focus group or a survey specific to an operational plan and planning for that would be helpful. She recommended boat rentals to be done at an offsite location and not try to incorporate boat rentals on site at our locations. That food trucks would need utility hookups. She recommended pop-up events, after occupying the space or turning the switch on and the space being available to the public after the project's done, to have pop-up events to test different things out, rather than think that there's a perfect answer and implement it and be done with it. Instead, to kind of use the first period of time to try things out, and then to have surveys afterwards, or to ask for input before locking anything in. They recommended not to spend the money on, not to spend excessive money on parking, to keep that at a minimal, considering it is, prime real estate, riverfront. Give people a chance to provide feedback with yard signs. Movie nights they've been successful with to kind of get and give information, to create a venue to attract people in order to ask the right questions and engage based on your intentions. Let's see what else as I'm reading through these notes here. Maintenance plan and schedule, of course, is important. So as far as the next steps, kind of like what we've talked about kind of at the high level so far at the subcommittee, is to either have a stakeholder meeting, like a focus group, or a survey to the right stakeholders to find out what we don't know, and to help incorporate that into our plan, and to listen to what future potential business partners would like. And then once the park is open, to have pop-up events and surveys to kind of further dial that in. And Luke had some good feedback to me in the email. I wanted to give Luke, if you can kind of share anything that you gleaned and recommended next steps as well.
Sure, you summarized pretty much all of it there. Some of the Grand Rapids is a city of 200,000. So scope and scale, what are we at? 6, 8. So there's a little bit of that, but what was interesting is the river, they're removing 5 low-head dams. So over the course of 2 miles, there's an 18-foot drop. And when we asked about, hey, what are you doing? And none of the conversation went that way. So it was something I was expecting to, hey, how did you do this? And it was really focused on other aspects, which is interesting. The way they described, I think my big takeaway that I heard was the way they talked about how Grand Rapids was built, and how the river was industry and all the backs of the buildings are turned to the river, and they're trying to open it back up. There's flood walls, there's a lot of concrete space. And at the very end, Michael mentioned, he's like, because we were talking about parking as our limiting factor for this just for this successful park. And he's like, do you really want parking on your riverfront? So their whole project is to remove the hardscape and provide access. And we're going the other way. So I know it's a balance there. So it's just an interesting take on that. I like how they utilize, you mentioned yard signs, but it's talking about how people want to interject early and often in the process. And if you can utilize something as cheap as a yard sign with the QR code to where you can say, hey, something's happening here. Would you like to see this here? And kind of do the more interactive surveys, which I thought was kind of a interesting idea. And I think, Brian, you hit all the other stuff fairly well, so I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, overall, I think it was helpful, and the great thing is they actually opened up their time and accessibility to us in the future as well. Any future questions and that sort of thing. It was funny. They were kind of gloating in a way about how they're considered like the beer capital of the country and had no idea of Asheville. So we were able to share a little bit of that, and Woodfin to share a little bit of that competitive talk with them. I think we compete for Beer City with Grand Rapids on a regular.
And if you think it's cold here, it's only a high of 10 there. So
I heard a lot of interesting suggestions out of what you just went through, and I was down at the at Silverline yesterday or day before, and with the pavement down and with the ramp completely finished. The last time I was down there, the paving was sort of going on, but the trucks and everything were in the way. And one of the things that I noticed was that the proportion of paving and building is a substantial part of the park. And I just hadn't gotten that impression before, maybe because the blacktop wasn't there, but also the role of the building loomed much larger in the scheme of the park than I had seen it before. So I know that's, I guess, Luke, that's still a work in progress, figuring out how to deal with a building in the floodplain. But it was a bit of an eye opener for me, and therefore interesting that you comment about the different approach that they're taking to parking, particularly given the amount of time that we've spent, talking about parking and trying to accommodate parking. So do you have any? I mean, that sounds like it pretty well covers it.
Yeah, I think as far as next steps go, because of the nature of our, the pandemic, I think a survey might be the way that I'm leaning to get more feedback to help us in our planning efforts. I wanted to kind of hear from everybody, from whether it's outfitters and concessions. What are your thoughts on whether a focus group versus a survey, and any other thoughts on that?
I was thinking more along the lines of RFP, because we have a very unique or small portion that we're looking at. There's whatever we can do with the Silverline building, which I'll talk about. Well, I had some questions about that later on. But then it's in the turnaround part of Riverside. So it's, a small space for 3 connexes or something. So it's a very specific space that we have, or a very small space. So I don't know, what do you guys think?
Having said that, Luke, if we can start with a narrative of some sort of, the specification, in an RFP of what is that we have up for grabs, what's the square footage, what's the train, what's the GPS coordinates or whatever, and then, kind of get us started on that RFP where we can, review and offer input, unless you have a different approach that you want to propose.
Yeah, let me think about that. Maybe I'll bounce it between you and I.
Yeah,
and
great.
That's it. Because if I could narrow it down, maybe use some of like the 30% design element and show, hey, this is what we're going to be building here. We have an opportunity for this small square footage, and it needs to be mobile, and list some requirements.
Yeah.
And just go out there and express interest to see what's out there. Because I think that would be helpful for both locations, because it's either going to be food, it's going to be related to biking or rafting. It's very, I guess, in what I can envision, that's what it's.
Yep.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, I'm not sure I'm totally following. So a request for a proposal on how to use the building or how to incorporate a food vendor? Like, I'm not sure I follow the vision.
Yeah. Yeah, Luke, you want to answer that?
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to, let's see, I got to click share. Okay, so picture speaks 1,000 words. So this is going to get to, if the idea is let's look at the building. This is kind of the visual concept of just an open air space, cut down a lot of walls. It's in the floodplain. The need we have is to install a permanent bathroom. To be able to do that is pretty challenging. And so we've got this, I forget, 18,000 square foot building that it's limited space. So you can kind of see in that open space, there's really not a lot of things you can do except that. So is there something we can do with like picnic tables or outdoor venue? What's not shown is up in the roof area, there's like 12,000, I think it's listed here, 12 or anyway, it doesn't matter, 6,000 square feet of usable space. So there's an option, like a potential that we can, hey, put that out there. Would a rafting outfitter use that as office space and store their boats down below? So kind of here's what we have. It's a blank slate. How could you envision using this? And then ask to come back to us.
For a fee, like to lease the space or?
Yeah, all this has to be worked out, right?
Yeah, okay, right.
Well, since we're here, you want me to just go ahead and show the rest of these?
Sure.
Because one of these things that I really want to bring to you guys is really a form of a question, is what kind of questions do you have surrounding this building? Eric and I posed some questions to PFA and kind of threw out like some big picture stuff of how we could envision something happening. Purely from a floodplain engineering architect, like what can we do? What are our boundaries? And so we came through with like 4 options. So this is purely conceptual. I don't have dollar figures. We're at the stage of $1 sign, $2 signs, $4 signs. It's kind of where we're at. So this is one concept, is I don't know how technical to get into this, but so I'm going to try to summarize. If you build a bathroom on ground floor, you have to build it to be flood proof, and so you're spending a lot of money for a very small square foot. The other option is to elevate the bathroom. Well, if you elevate the bathroom, you now have to provide ramps and there we go. So this is what, I guess I should have just clicked the slide down to show you. This is that's the upstairs space. So you can see a ramp going up, and you would have about 2,500 square foot that you could potentially rent out. And then that would supply us with the bathrooms.
Luke, can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Have you looked above that ceiling down there?
yes.
The way the trusses are made, I don't see how you're going to utilize any of that space.
There's, bear with me to scroll. So on one side of the building, the trusses come down to the 8-foot ceiling. On the
Yes,
other side, I need to use my hands. It kind of goes up. It's boxed out for like a second story.
like a cathedral type ceiling.
Yes.
Okay. Is that on the doggy daycare end?
Let's see. North is down in the picture, so
No, it's on the other end.
I think
On
yeah.
Okay. You know, you've probably done more research. My understanding is we can't spend more than half the value of the property because it being in a floodplain.
Right. So that only applies to building. So there's a provision if you build above 2 foot above the base flood elevation,
But how
you don't have that restriction.
But I don't see how you're going to do it with the existing building already on the footprint.
So we would have, what you would do is you would make, it's kind of like building with stilts. Flood doesn't impact it. So you open that building up to let floodwaters in and out.
Right.
And then in the meantime, we can utilize that as, covered pavilion type space. There's a lot of things, a lot of boundaries, constraints that we have. We can't open the entire building up because then we would trigger, hey, we need to put sprinklers in this because it can. Right. So there's a lot of restrictions, and this one's pretty challenging in that when we get to where, let me scroll down and show you this, which is kind of a neat concept. Yeah, so that's the approximate size of open area that you can have without triggering needing sprinklers. And we don't want to do that because that would add a lot of cost.
Exactly. Well, plus, with an open air building like that, they're going to freeze and burst. There's even a dry system. You got to have a standpipe full of water. You know what I'm saying? Right.
So when we start talking like leasing, the idea that I'm thinking here is there's plenty of space to park food trucks. So if you had bathroom and open air pavilion and you had place for 4 or 5 food trucks to come and park, could you envision, this being a parking space where people could, something like that,
right.
Kind of open air. And so then we get into, I think these are just view sheds, different views. So then if you elevate the bathroom, you don't have to, all the floodway or floodplain restrictions, you don't have to have electrical from at the ceiling and out of it. And there's a lot of things you don't have to do.
They have to handicap accessible.
Right. So here's an option where we go up that 7 feet, build a bathroom, and have that 2,500, open space for a tenant. And how
handicap accessible, Luke?
I'm so glad you asked. So you would have to ramp up to it. I mean, this is purely conceptual, but and this is the side where that ramp is where that wetland is. So maybe we tuck the ramp around and kind of create a space along that wetland that, cantilevers out over it. There's a lot of different thoughts, but you can see costs going up with
a lot.
Early on, look, not to interrupt you, early on, we had discussed, and all of it may have got changed before you got here, of gutting the building and utilizing the bathroom on the south end of the building. And I talked with Bob Haynes at Bunk County Inspections. He gave us the dimensions to convert those 2 bathrooms that's back to back in the south end of the building to handicap accessible, and we could use them for the park. and the rest of the building was to be gutted, and just like y'all saying, get some input of if somebody wanted to upfit it for a kayak or snack shop or anything. I just don't, this concept, and I know it's a concept, I don't see how we can afford that.
And that's a lot. That's kind of the question, you know, as I debate whether to show these or kind of work in different group, but that's kind of where I'm at is, you know, we can go a couple different directions here. You're really limited to, you know, we've already spent a third of the money that by putting the roof on it. So just demoing and opening up the walls and making them structurally sound would probably eat up the rest of that money. So
You know,
I struggle with this one as the I know I don't have all the facts, but I can see this taking a lot of money. I didn't get a picture of the building, so I struggle with showing the architectural rendering because it makes it look really nice.
right. You know, it's a post beam building. None of the interior walls are load bearing. So you could gut the whole 12,000 square
So
feet.
then,
Correct.
Ronnie, you mentioned the idea of using the existing bathrooms, gutting the rest, and potentially open that space to, you know, vendors, concessions of some sort.
Yes, sir.
Is that what's currently kind of budgeted in the budget and in the concept designs that led to the budget, or?
I can't answer that part far as the budget. Eric and I think Ryan was in on it. We just, you know, bounced ideas around what to do with the existing building.
I look at this as the beginning of a project. What are we, you know, which path, which lane do we want to go? Or do you want to see kind of walk down a couple different options to see?
Well, I think money's going to answer that.
You guys familiar with the what is that, an Amboy Road near that tower on the other, not the river side of the road, the other side? They have that little snack shop. There's a fire pit in the back.
The
That
food
old-
truck parking.
Yeah,
Yep.
food truck parking, and there's a place where they, you know, serve beer and stuff. Is there a correlation there as far as concepts go?
Well, that's always possible. They're in, I think you're referring to the old Cascade Lounge there beside the Citgo.
Yes, yeah, right beside the gas station there.
In the same boat we're in, basically in the floodplain, you know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, that's always a thought.
So that,
You know, all these ideas are good. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to vet out all the different options. And I also, going back to what we talked with the folks at Grand Rapids, is I remember one of the things they mentioned was something about portable bathrooms. It's like, don't worry, you can spend so much money on a bathroom. You could also just rent one of those really nice ones and then you're done.
Right.
So, you know, one of the alternatives could be to make it a portable. I mean, you've seen the ones out there. So I think it's at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually at this stage of the project, you don't throw out any ideas. You go ahead and flesh them out and try to get, you know, dollar amounts. And then if you come back and say, there's no way we're going to spend $5 million on this, then all right, great, let's move on. Let's focus in on what we want to try to solve.
yeah, knowing what that cost, the budget constraint is, as well as the design constraints would you know, be necessary.
Certainly.
Have we processed and thought about the idea of just flattening the building?
That's what I'm talking. Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah, that's
referring to.
what you're
is
getting at. Okay.
Yep.
How expensive is that?
I haven't priced that out yet.
Well, and the thing about it is now, if you keep in mind, you'd have to raise the whole area if you flatten the building.
It would incorporate in some nice green space though, to Walt's point earlier.
You know, you can do anything if you got the money.
Yeah.
One
true.
of the things that I was not aware of until not too long ago was that a building that's built in the floodplain is grandfathered.
Right.
And if it's torn down and nothing is put back within, I don't know, 3 months or 6 months or something like that, then
think it's
you
up.
forever lose the option of putting a building in there.
Right.
And I don't know if that applies to the same footprint, the same foundation, or smaller or whatever, but I think that's something that, we would need to keep in mind if we were to go that way.
Right.
Another thing is that I can see the obvious advantage to an income stream from renting space out, but it also seems like could be some conflict from having a full-time business inside of one of our parks. I can't be more specific because I haven't really thought it out, but I think that's an aspect that we would need to consider in addition to what it would take to physically allow somebody to do that.
I kind of think it's weird, honestly. As a business owner, I think it would be strange to be in the middle of a community park. And I haven't thought it out either, but it just feels off to me.
It is interesting. It's different than the whole just food truck in a parking lot mindset, and the outfitters kind of bringing their boats and remotely managing the drop off and pick up of their clients and such. But I go back to the Amboy Road thing, and what's the deal there? There is a snack shop. I mean, I've plenty of times with kids, ride the bikes, pop in there, get a snack, lunch, go in the back, and there's chickens, and there's that, the old boat sitting there, and kind of just play around there, and then hit the trail again. I'm curious of is the concessions there. Does the city see any part of that? Is there a relationship there? I'm just curious is all, to see if there's any lessons learned or ideas that may correlate.
As far as I know, the where Cascade Lounge and all that stuff is not on city property.
No, it's private.
Yeah.
It is private.
Yeah, I mean, it's not odd to have a concessionaire or something like that in a park. I mean, they do those at a lot of places. So I mean, I guess it would depend on what type of business it is. But I do know that from the county perspective, before I came over to the city, they're really trying to get out of some of those agreements because they usually turn out to be not very beneficial for the municipality or government themselves, and a lot more beneficial for the actual business owner. If you know, like Hominy Creek River Park down past the transfer station, there is a like bar outfitter that's down there, and it hasn't been the best relationship. And so I would say, really, if this is a road that we go down, to really, really think about how the contract's written and what's going to be allowed, what's not going to be allowed, and stuff like that as you get in there, because it is a potential source of income. But at the same time, there's a difference between a nationwide company that does golf course management, throughout the state and throughout the nation, and then a local business doing an agreement as well. So
yeah, that's great perspective there, especially considering our talk about potential boat rentals and such on site versus, they do their thing at their spot and then use a van to get back and forth, and they just need the turnaround space and the drop off space for their boats, versus, operating like the Hominy Creek, boat rental bar scenario. There's some local lessons learned there that we could probably tap into, which very good feedback. So that sounds like it's not the best scenario to have an outfitter on site operating their business compared to mobily supporting the community with getting on and off the river.
I wonder, I mean, the park is so, is designed with children in mind. It's gonna be such a family friendly. I wonder if that upstairs could be for like birthday parties, like just wood fin rentals for birthday parties or any kind of celebration.
Yeah, I think you could
Community
have that at the
for the
lower
future.
level as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the challenge for me is you can be on the order of spending millions of dollars and you're still in the floodway or floodplain, sorry, even though it's elevated. And so are our tax, is the dollars better spent elsewhere? Juxtaposed to if you raise the building, then you can't build anything else there. So it's a balancing act. And so really it's kind of run the gambit on a couple of different options. Where should I go from here?
Well, the bathrooms, is that something that we should try to save and focus on, considering the utilities are there?
I certainly like the idea of the attractive rental units. I mean, that seems like it saves money, puts the burden of maintenance on somebody else.
What do you
And it's
mean?
not-
What do
Well,
you mean?
Luke mentioned, I mean, the only Porta Johns that I've used are the ones that are, not that attractive, but, you mentioned that there were nicer ones. I'm not familiar with them, but if there are that have, the ability to wash your hands or, whatever, then, I think that's something that we should certainly explore.
While you're here, and I'm gonna change the subject. I'm sorry, I've got to go. I've been down there several times at the park, and you have too. I don't know if you've noticed. Several afternoons I've been down there. The boat ramp's full of cars. There's kids running around everywhere, dogs running around everywhere. People are really kind of taking the park over during construction. I'm wondering if we should, or can we put up a chain, or should we block off that area till the construction's over? We got a lot of heavy equipment, boulders, timbers, stuff down there. I'm just worried about a safety.
Well, Luke and Ronnie, how does that work? I know from a building perspective, the idea of a certificate of occupancy, not able to occupy until the permit is done. And if there's a correlation, then that's a good point. We need to take that in consideration. Is that a requirement?
I mean, it can be to me now, and like I said, I'm sorry I got to go. If they just park a track hole across the road or something to keep cars out when they leave in the afternoon.
Is that really necessary at this stage? We're at 95%. You're basically done.
Well, and that may be the case too, but I'm asking, what liability does the town of Woodfin have if a kid gets hurt falling off a bulldozer or something?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think kids should be crawling on the bulldozers, as fun as that is.
Yeah.
Is there within your permitting process that you're within right now, is there a point where you get a certificate of occupancy where then is the only time that space can be used compared to not during construction? When
everything's finished and the final inspection's done, the county will give a occupancy, go ahead. And it may not be. I just brought that up, throw around with everybody. Like I said, I've been down there several times. It's been very busy.
Ronnie, I'd like to jump the agenda just a minute if you're going to have to leave, because one of the things that I wanted to do as we got further down the page is look at some of the items that we had for that are for future discussion. And one of those were the ramps, the skate ramps. And it seems to me that since we've decided not to use those, that the town probably ought to sell them. Or, but that's going to be a board, conversation and discussion. But at some point, they're in that building, they're taking up space. They are an asset with some work.
We can always put them on gov deals or something, see how it goes.
Well, I just wanted to mention, I didn't know that needed to be the sort of recommendation. The rest of us haven't really talked about it, but I did want to bring it up.
Okay.
But I think that is an idea that's been pretty effectively killed. So,
Okay. We will.
so I wasn't sure how.
We'll discuss that next meeting.
And circling back, Ronnie, to that, to your mention as far as the safety aspect thing, I think it is important to use as many cones and caution tape as possible right now to at least exhibit diligence, or at least, that way if something does happen, decreases liability.
I'm glad at this stage the park's getting the people that we want to enjoy the park, and I certainly don't want to keep them from doing that. I'm just right now with the boulders and everything we have just ready to be placed. I've just brought that up for a safety issue. I didn't know if we want to stop them, let them continue to play. If somebody gets hurt, if the town's liable or not. If they're not liable, then I don't have a problem with it.
It would seem to me that some of that, some liability might fall on the contractor. The times that I've been down there, it's not been weather that very many people were out.
Right.
But is Baker, have they raised an issue with people being in the way? Or
Ronnie, can you ask the attorney that to see?
I will. I'll call Joe and ask him.
Okay, I think it would be.
It was one of the pretty Sundays we had, I don't know, 3 weeks ago now. And the weather was nice, and I'm glad people were enjoying it, but it just made me nervous.
Since we have pictures and we're talking about it, I'm gonna put them up there.
I would think that to the extent possible, we would not want to discourage people at this point.
Right.
We want to get the word out. I mean, that's part of what we're talking about. And word of mouth is one of the best ways to do that.
I agree.
Yeah, they're loading up the heavy equipment and removing it. You see where before they would always park their heavy equipment at the boat ramp, so to keep people from using it.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I mean, I struggle to see where anyone could get hurt aside from being anywhere along the riverbank.
Okay.
They just had a couple of excavators and a large buggy when I was down there the other day.
Yeah, those are getting out of there. They're getting down to the finished grade.
Okay. Well, I was talking about that before y'all got here. Quite a bit of construction still left on the parent ship with the mast and everything.
Yeah, so they're going to get as far as they can. They can't do that upper level until they set the mast, because then it closes in. But they're
about the mast. Do you know when it's supposed to be delivered?
Nope.
Okay.
Something as small as this piece of Schedule 80 pipe. It's anyway.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
yeah. I'm used to I can call my fabricator like, hey, it's here in 4 days. I mean, come on, guys. Anyway.
Well, back then I've got to go and back at this, they made a big deal out of the template for the mast footer. That really got on me there.
Yeah.
Especially
well, I dug into that, Ronnie, and even though I was asking that question, they're like, they could send the template, we could make the template, but the mast wasn't even in production yet. So it was kind of a moot point. Yeah.
Well, and Roger and Son right across the street, they can make anything. You know what I'm saying? They want to make a big deal.
Yeah.
That ticked me off. But anyway, thank y'all. Appreciate everything.
Thanks for sitting in on the meeting, Ronnie.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Yes. I'll talk to you while.
Okay.
Have a good one.
You
Bye.
too. Okay, is there the one final comment about the use of the building and food trucks? I haven't frankly given very much thought to food trucks because most of the conversation was around the outfitters and boats and stuff like that. But the conversation with the people in Grand Rapids raised an interesting point about food trucks needing, utilities. So I think of them as kind of standalone. Before that comment, I wouldn't assume that they needed much in the way of facilities.
Yeah,
You know,
you
like-
want, if ideally you would hook them up to power so they're not out there running generators.
Power and water. I mean, unless we were to require that they are standalone, and that could be a requirement within.
Well, we
the
have
environment.
power, water, and sewer all right there. So if you're gonna do it, you might as well provide the hookup.
Right.
It's a better end user experience, I would think.
Yeah.
And then, and then you could lease it, so there's not everyone, you can have some type of, we can work out the details. So it's not just free for all.
Okay.
So,
But
one question about the building, what do you think is, how much money would you think we'd be willing to spend on this?
Okay, you mentioned a limitation just a few minutes ago. A percentage of the cost towards improvements or something like that. Is that mandated?
Yes. It's
Okay.
50%, it's 50% of the assessed value in the floodplain. So if you build above it, you're not limited to that cap. If you build below it, and so at this point, I think it was like, we're in the 150 range with the last assessment. So it's you're looking at $150,000, $200,000 to work with if you were to do something underneath. So you're limited on that aspect.
Okay, so and how deep is that in the floodplain?
7 feet.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
I'm just trying to gauge, like, if we could get one of these options for $500,000, is that something that we would entertain, or are we looking at $1.5 million? Or, it's going to be expensive to get there when it's in the back of my head. The options I see are very expensive when, yes, I know we paid a lot of money for that plot of land in that building, but there's not a lot of value in that building as I see it. What if one of the options is just tear it all down and put some bathrooms in? So I think there it's probably get prices or get.
It strikes me as too much building for that location, for one thing.
Mhm.
Almost no matter how it's used. And what would be, or why can't we just put the whole thing on hold until we get the whole money nut cracked for everything else?
Oh yeah,
Make-
this is not part of the cost of any of the projects budgeted right now.
okay. Yeah,
This
that's
is an initial, like, call this phase 4 or whatever it is. This is the conception of the project. The only thing that's driving us is, I think there's a requirement that you can only do temporary bathrooms for 8 months or a year or something like that. So that's kind of what's driving driving this.
Temporary in terms of what?
You can't put porta johns out there permanently.
Well, can we put them out there from, May to November? Or something like that?
I mean, I would think the park needs bathrooms, because that was going to be my question. Does it need a bathroom? But I mean, yes, it would be nice to have a bathroom.
Are there any other bathrooms within that proximity on the park? Is that the only utilities? I favor the idea of capitalizing, doubling down on the utilities that are already there. As I always hate to cap utilities, I mean, we already have plumbing. Let's capitalize on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for a 5-acre park, especially one that's geared towards, an intergenerational space and anything from toddlers to older adults, restrooms are kind of like a must.
So
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out how to best do that. And I believe the existing bathrooms are at the opposite end of the building to where the playground is. So, playground is where mom is going to be with kids. And it's logistically, it's, they got to walk out and through half the parking lot to go into the building. And so it's, that was why we're looking at the different options of building a new bathroom closer.
So the idea of temporary bathrooms, porta-john seems to be off the table with that mindset. If we're going to tap into the utilities that are there, right? If we're going to use the utilities that are already there, the infrastructure there, temporary bathrooms wouldn't be in that, within that concept. Demoing the bill. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
And then, so what is the most cost-effective way to utilize the utilities, the bathroom that's already there? What would be the most cost-effective way out of the concepts that we looked at?
Well, to me, it's not just, I agree that, we should not cap off any utilities unless, we're very sure that abandonment is what we're choosing to do. But it seems like if we made a large investment towards bathrooms in order to utilize the utilities that were there, that in itself could limit or guide how the rest of the facility is utilized in a way that we can't necessarily foresee right now.
Well, if we know we can't permanently have regularly or permanently, whatever the information is, have porta-johns, and we know that we need bathrooms, is there another option? And
I would like to, just because Luke used the phrase really nice, portable bathrooms, which, as I said, I've never seen. I'd like to explore that. I'd like to see if there was, I know that there's been a lot of work by large cities because, bathrooms in cities has become an issue. And there you go.
I think this is probably a little nicer. But you get the idea.
Well, I would think that we could, rent something like that for some period of months while we, figured it out.
Yep.
And,
yeah, for kind of a temporary plan. I see. Yeah,
because I believe that we need to have a really well thought out comprehensive plan, because everything, even opening up the building, putting headers in there and all of that seems expensive without, redoing the roof line and building ramps and stuff like that. Just opening those bays up, that looks to me like that alone would consume a big part of the amount of money that we would have to spend. And then we would end up with a great big empty building that was open, but not otherwise very desirable for anything.
Like a pavilion or, possibly, picnic tables or something.
Yeah, but it's still big. I mean, it's far bigger, it's far larger than anything we would need for, almost anything that I could conceive right now.
What is on the master plan on that site?
That building.
It's grayed out, I believe.
Future phase.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
One of the
almost like a moot point then, I guess.
right. One of the things, if you do something in the flood, like if we were to go in there and put bathrooms at grade, that would then limit us from doing any of those future options, because just the way the rules are written. So there's a lot of each option, whatever option we pick kind of locks you into what you're going to do. So,
so what can we do to help you, Lucas, from a committee standpoint? What can we do to help make that decision? Or do we need information first? More information.
So
as far as this cost.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. We do have a stopgap right now. There's a wooden screen built for the normal porta-johns out there. So we do have that in place. So when we open, we'll have them there. Maybe it's really, I'm struggling with the amount of money to get to that would be needed to get to just have bathrooms. And so it was, I think I've got to follow up the process and kind of vet out some of these options to come back to, like, I think there's through Eric, there's the sense I got is, hey, we have this building, let's not get rid of the asset, can we use it in some way? And so I'm trying to figure out all those different ways we can use it, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay.
So I didn't answer your question, but yeah.
Well, no, so basically we need more information to help you. Costs for each of the concepts, how it relates to the budget. Because if it hasn't been part of the master plan, it's hard to make a decision.
Well, also it seems, I thought, Brian, that you had mentioned as part of the conversation with Grand Rapids, and I know that Mark Hunt has mentioned in the past to not necessarily worry about getting absolutely everything done right now. Open it up and see how people are using it. See what, let the park speak back to us a little bit in terms of utilization. I mean, we were making decisions on how many bathrooms for Riverside, but we really don't know, how many are needed. I mean, obviously, the decision has been reached. I don't know. It seems like with the building, this is one place that if there's a effective way to delay, which it seems like there is by having porta-johns behind the screen, then we would be best served by doing that until we have more information.
Agreed.
Well, and I have a real quick question, Luke. Is any of this involving bond money, and what's our expiration date on when we actually have to spend all of bond money?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would think no, because this is not a planned phase. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't a project yet. This is kind of conception.
Okay.
Yeah, when you said it's not part of the budget, I took that as it's not in any of the budget stuff, not connected with the bond, et cetera. So that would be good to know.
Do I remember that the bond had to be drawn down by sometime next year? There is a timeline.
Yeah, that was on Eric's timeline previously when he was doing the project, or at least, I know we've made a recommendation that it's part of the timeline, and it drives the decision making. I remember it to be next year as well, Walt.
I don't think there's a timeline to spend the money, but there's a timeline to sell the bonds after they've been approved, or you have to basically get the money back.
Well, that's interesting, given that they're talking about maybe 3 interest rate increases this year.
I don't know where I used to work in Morrisville. They passed a bond to redo a community center, but the town never did anything, and they were going to have to get the bond back. So they ended up actually doing the project. So
The bond that was passed by Asheville at the same time, we talk often about the expiration of stuff, and I do believe that it's coming up pretty soon. Although, even though we're talking about it a whole lot, I don't remember what it is. But I also know that Woodfin went to the General Assembly a couple of years after Asheville did, so there may be some difference between like the time that it was voted on and the time that it was actually granted by the General Assembly. But I'm not sure.
Luke, can you incorporate that into the timeline, or circle back with us on how that relates to the project timeline as far as the
Yes, it'll be February when my advisor comes back on board.
Yeah, and I'm making a note that we'll include that as a talking point for next month too.
Yeah, that'll be good.
I believe that definitely is in historical documents on timelines. Good as far as that goes. Let's see. I don't know if I find it, I'll share. But
I don't remember seeing it in writing anyplace. I don't remember seeing it as part of the spreadsheet, or I just remember conversation. Is there anything else that we can talk about the building at this point? Because I've got that on, also for future discussions.
What I can do is I'll send this chart and you can kind of read the pros and cons that PFA kind of laid out there. It's good to do it by yourself, not on a screen, so you kind of soak it in. And maybe we could talk about it next time. Or
okay. And so does that have both financial and physical limitations on it? That we cannot spend more than this, we cannot do this, we have to do that.
It's not all encompassing because this is conceptual. But it gives you some windows to work within.
Okay, because we might be backed into a pretty small corner when we weigh all of those things.
Yep, some of those, yeah, it does have some of it. You'll see.
Okay.
They actually did a pretty good job at everything. So.
Okay, are we ready to move on? Anybody have other comments? Okay, Luke, could you give us an update on what town administration looks like? Because I haven't, nothing was said at the last meeting, the last board meeting. So I have no idea, who's on first.
Ryan may actually know more than me. So the short answer is Sherry Powers is the interim, and they are interviewing candidates or seeking applications. Ryan, is there anything additional you'd like to add?
Yeah, we were just talking about that today, actually. The position closes next Friday, the 21st, for applications. And then it'll be on the agenda for the commissioners meeting on Tuesday night, how they want to proceed with selecting candidates, interviewing. The loose timeline is to have them at least announce the hiring in February, and depending where the person comes from, and some have to give 2 weeks notice, some have to give a month notice. So the actual start date is kind of in the air, but the intent is to hopefully be able to announce sometime in mid-February who the permanent town administrator is.
Have any interviews been taken?
No, because we're still collecting applications. So we'll do that all at once. Once we'll look at the applications will be sent to the commissioners the week of whatever that, the 24th.
And how about number of applications so far?
Right now, I believe there's 5.
Okay. And of course, I learned just the other day that Jim Angel has resigned. So the board is also going to be looking for another council member.
Can I ask you a quick question? Is Jim one of the new commissioners?
No, he's the former fire chief. He's been on the board for as long as I can remember. And I think he had some, I think he fell or had some health
Oh, no.
issues or whatever. But also he was one that virtually never spoke at a meeting other than to, make a motion or second a motion. So I don't know, the extent to which he contributed to non-meeting decisions that the board might have made. But I think the town is going to be actively looking for another council member.
Yeah, we put that is out. They're accepting applications for that. They're, I think, February 4th. And then in part of the press release that the selected candidates that the board is going to interview, I think, are on the 8th or 9th. And the person appointed to finish out Angel's term will be announced at the February 15th commissioners meeting and be sworn in that day.
Big meeting in February.
Yes.
Do you have any applications so far?
Right now, 0.
Okay, and the other item that I had for new business was the relations and agreements with outfitters. And it seems like we pretty well hashed that out. Does anybody have anything else to add to that? And I just had it on there because it seemed to me like it was one of the things that we had identified that we wanted to have made some decisions on before the park instead of having the park kind of open and then being inundated and maybe being forced to make ad hoc decisions that we might not be as happy with later on.
Yeah, Luke mentioned the RFP, and I think that correlates unless we wanted to do the survey or focus group route.
We could do if we build it, they'll come approach, because I'm kind of joking a little bit, but we could gauge usage because the only thing they can use is the boat ramp. There's no building, there's no space they can set up. So we could start to gauge usage of that, which outfitter is using it. But I do agree with what you're saying is it would be nice to have this in place when Riverside comes online, because there is space. Well, no, same situation could apply, but there's opportunity there. Whereas at Silverline, the building's locked. You can't get in there to use it. So I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but to me, it kind of goes beyond the building. For example, there looked like about 3 really long parking spaces for trailers right next to the boat ramp. Or it's certainly they're deeper than all the other parking spaces. So, that's a situation where an outfitter could come down, back in with the bus or a truck, truck and a trailer and load up and leave, or somebody could end up being down there and camping out effectively all day. And if we didn't have a policy one way or another, then we wouldn't have any way of saying, well, look, you just can't do that. With this. And I agree that, as I said earlier in another reference, that to a certain extent, we'll be better able to judge how the park is being used once it's open and actually being used. Right now, we don't have any sense of to what extent the outfitters are going to use it. We've had one outfitter at one meeting last year say, no, I'm not going to use it at all. I'm happy with what I've got. And then, we've also heard, oh no, they're going to be here in droves and, you're not going to be able to, beat them off with a switch. But the parking, when I was down there, the parking for those, what looked like 3 slots was one thing that came to mind. So if it's a private person, that's one thing. If it's it's an outfitter, I don't know. It seems like we're in a lull time right now. And so even if we don't implement anything, now would be a good time to try to, flesh out the parameters that we think that we want, subject to change, until we're put in a place where we've made agreements and can't change them.
Luke, what do you think about sending the the concept design, a summary scope, as far as an amenity summary, whatever, and just through a survey and asking the outfitters how they'd like to use it.
Yeah, because I was, the mechanics of this, I'd love to see what that looks like. And any thoughts on how to, broadcast that out to gauge support. I think that's probably where
as
we're
far
at.
as just the visual concept, the amenities that are coming online, and with a couple questions of how they see their business using or how they would like to use it. Is that, Walt, would that give information? Would that give you the information or give us the information that would help you feel better about preparing for their interest?
At this point, I'm thinking more, I'm not really considering the building at all. That.
Right,
to me,
the ramps, the parking, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's just, business using the park, facilities, which is the ramp and the parking at this point. And what is our approach to that? You're welcome to come and use it, but don't stay longer than half an hour. If you want to use it, then there's going to be a fee of so much per year. I don't know. I just,
Yeah.
I just think that if we're going to look at it as a fee-based something, as opposed to a, no fee something, then that seems like at least an initial decision that,
I'm not the subject matter expert here from a parks and parks and greenway standpoint, but I don't see it being a fee-based opportunity unless we include concessions. As far as using parking space, using the boat ramp, I don't see any business case there from a public park scenario. But again, I don't know what I don't know. So
is there any type of arrangement down by the transfer station park? Sorry,
that's public. Yeah. Come and go as you please. Yeah. And
why is this not? Wouldn't this be the same? I mean, I don't see any difference except that there's limited parking in I guess I should ask the question. What's the intent of doing this? It sounds like it is to limit the use of outfitters to allow for the public to use. Is that right?
Even as far as the public utilization, if I'm correct that there's only the three slots there, it's normally if you've got a boat on a trailer, you come in and you put the boat in the trailer and park right there. And then the boat goes off and you do fishing or whatever, and then come back and load up.
Yeah.
Which would mean that those 3 slots could get filled up,
There's probably 5
8
parking
o'clock in the
spaces
morning.
on the other side of Silverline Building. There's flat land, people will find it. But you're right, you don't want them to. So I guess that's my question.
Well, so at the river access parks that currently exist, that Buncombe County and City of Asheville oversee, the outfitters generally come, drop off, and leave. And most of the people who utilize it will drive up, take their kayak or paddleboard or whatever vessel they've got, unload it, and then park their car elsewhere. Because most people who use the river do have that understanding and respect that other people are going to be using it. There have been conversations over the years between the city and the county, because those are the only river access points in Buncombe County really that were public, about getting some sort of permit for outfitters. And I know Eric had sort of been in on some of those conversations as well. It's something that's coming up a lot more because there are, this is going to be a premier access point or takeout point down here at Silverline Park, because everything is pretty modern versus just concrete reinforced steps or other things that aren't very safe. And so I think those are conversations that probably need to happen. But like Brian said, it's really hard to enforce unless you actually have somebody who's on site. And currently, really none of the river access parks have any staffing. But in terms of, improvements that need to happen at these parks, the main users who are making a profit off of them are currently the outfitters. And the outfitters definitely demand and ask for, upgrades, but, there's never any offer to pay for them.
Right. Yeah, that would be, there's no precedent really, right? As far as
Not
charging.
yet. I mean, it's something that definitely, we could talk, the department over here at the City of Asheville, there's a new director coming in a couple of weeks. And then there's a new director who'll be coming in at Buncombe County sometime in the next few months as well. It might be a great time to have that conversation in terms of how that would be policed if there was a fee that the outfitters paid for that maybe had a ranger that was shared throughout those three entities. Because I also think it's going to be important as we have more and more people accessing the river, because we're making it more accessible, is we're going to have people who aren't at that advanced level going into places that they may not be prepared for, like Ledges Park, which has a little more brackish water. And so that we might need to have some sort of system like the National Forest do, where it says today is a heavy fire day. Don't have a fire. Maybe today is a really dangerous day to be on a river, and signs those different access points. That's a bigger conversation outside of like what this is, I guess. But I do think that it's something that we should be thinking about for the near future.
Well, I don't have an opinion of one way or the other. I'm just trying to say, because I don't know anything about it. I'm just suggesting that it seems like now's the time that we should be thinking about it or trying to come up with something. And I like Chris's thought that we should join in a conversation with maybe the city and the county. I'm not sure if you actually made that as a suggestion, but it seems like we are, we're a player now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in many ways, the Greenway portion of this is going to connect the two parks that are along the river in Woodfin, all the way into Reynolds Mountain, and eventually with the sidewalk that will connect into Wilma Dykeman, all the way into Hominy Creek River Park. And then, in the next 5 or 6 years, there's supposed to be an extension from Hominy Creek River Park all the way through the Asheville outlets to the Ferry Road property, Bent Creek River Park through Pratt and Whitney to Biltmore Park. So, that's crossing a lot of jurisdictions, and people are, they're not going to know when they're going from one to the other who they need to call if they've got an issue with safety or some other thing. And so I think that this is, and the CVB has said that they are very interested in helping fund some of this stuff in terms of the communications and the signs and pieces like that. But again, I think when these two new Parks and Rec directors start, and we have our town administrator in Woodfin, that's a really great time for those three people to get together.
Okay. Well, I think that this is something that needs to sort of stay on the agenda until we get it resolved. Beyond that, any other thoughts before we move on? Okay, a month and a half or so ago, Eric raised the question about a historian. And he didn't really flesh his ideas out with me very much, but I have located someone. Marlene Berry is currently, she has a full-time job. She volunteers with Rocky Hollifield at the Craggy Mountain Line. And her degree was in history. She was history major. She was I think she had some sort of association with the Vance Park Memorial, not memorial, but the Vance birthplace. I'm not sure, she might have been on the board. She volunteers as the brakeman on the train. And so for those of us that took the trolley ride, she was the one that talked about the history of the prison and the trolleys and all this. So I approached her and she said she would be glad to help in some capacity, given the constraints that are already on her plate. And the first opportunity that she would have to meet would be, she could only meet on Saturdays. First opportunity would be on the 22nd. And I told her that in fact, it might be into February before we actually met. However, I think that that the gist of what Eric was telling me was that his thought was to tie or provide information within the parks that would give people a sense of history. And as I've been thinking about it, it seems to me that a lot of the history, both of Craggy Mountain Line and the trolleys, maybe the prison, she mentioned the old Episcopal church and how that had gotten there. Of course, the utilization of the river. A lot of that predates Woodfin as a corporate entity. So with that in mind, what I'm imagining is that there would be some level of signage at some point, not too much, that would highlight some of these things. But that sort of spills over into signage, which can obviously come later, I think would have to come later, but it's already been raised. I guess in summary, I was wound up to find somebody to do something and I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be, but I have found someone. And so I just wanted to, at this point, I guess, just let you all know, ask if you have any thoughts on it. I wouldn't, what I told Eric at the time that he asked was that both committees were fully invested right now and did not have the time to, take on the job of historical research. And it was, in that guise that I said, I'll see if I can find somebody that might do it. I don't know whether this is a volunteer thing, a pro bono, if there's, I know very little about it, other than the fact that I found somebody that seems qualified, has some interest in contributing to some extent. And if it involves signage, then there will be some level of cost that's associated with that at least. So anybody have anything to say beyond that? Okay, and I keep the next item. I keep the little free libraries on the agenda. We've got two of them in Riverside Park. One of them that's up towards the school is not being utilized very much, and it's in the part of the park that not very many people go to. I would suggest that we pull that up and put it in Silverland Park. I'm not sure where. I was surprised, and Luke, maybe you can tell me what's that mailbox doing in Silverland Park? In Silverland. Okay, well, there's a black mailbox that's okay.
I am not visualizing it in my head, so I don't know what it's for. It's probably
okay. It's to the right of the boat ramp, about 15 or 20 yards off to the right, but between the parking lot and the river. Now, I didn't go over and look in it or anything. But these little free libraries, and I forget, maybe Kennedy can remind me how many we've got. Seems like we've got 10 or 12 of them, and they cost right at $300 a piece. The ones that we bought. Some of them need some level of repair, but so Kennedy says we have a dozen of them. So we've got a fair amount of money invested in them already. $3,000. And so it would seem like a program that we should at least utilize to the extent that we have one that could be fairly easily pulled up and relocated. But that's not going to happen unless somebody says, yeah, that's a good idea. let's do it. And Johnny goes out and, digs a hole and plants it. If you all are not familiar with the little free libraries, it's basically a public lending library. It's just, people drop off books. I've left books at them. I've taken books out of them. So, it's a zero maintenance other than perhaps a little touch-up work on the ones that are broken right now. It's something that Jason started, and I'd like to keep it going. Any thoughts?
I favor the idea if there's one that's not being used, to move it in a more higher profile, highly visible, higher trafficked space. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. Makes sense. I don't think Riverside needs to. Although I don't think the one at the top of the parking lot's a great spot either.
I agree with that too.
But yeah, if we had one, I would say there's got to be a more central location for it. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Walt, to shift one to the new park.
If we have, some general consensus on that, Luke, is that just something that you could just write a work order for Johnny? Drive down there and pick a location? Or do you want, how do you want to go about it?
I want to wait for the park to be complete. Yeah, but I think that's how that would work. So I can talk with him.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree. There's certainly no rush. Okay, and before moving on to the project updates, I wanted to just talk very briefly about the items that are on the future discussion. One of them that has come up just in talking today has been alcohol in the parks. That's particularly if we're talking about, do food trucks have alcohol licenses? I don't think I've ever.
I've not seen one that does. Sierra Nevada is different. They bring it from their shop. So.
Okay, so we don't, I don't think we've got a policy, or at least I've never heard of it, for alcohol in Woodfin's parks. When we took the trolley ride, Rocky made an impassioned plea to not have alcohol, and before that, I hadn't given it any thought one way or another. But it seems to be something that we should have. We should recommend that there be a policy on, whatever that policy is, that we shouldn't just, sort of ignore it. And of course, there's probably for the people that are going to, bring their cooler with a 6-pack in it or something like that, there's no real regulating that. And by and large, I think people are pretty discreet about that. But when we talk about potentially selling, then that becomes something entirely different. So that becomes a part of the, the food truck concessions, conversation. And I just didn't want to leave it buried down at the bottom of the page without it, being mentioned, because it seems like it's all part of that same conversation.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend we make a policy right now one way or another, but that there may be a benefit, whether it's a fundraising event or, because we have had Blue Way, Greenway events where alcohol was a big part of it. We had sponsors and such, when we had the Blue Way, Greenway events in the past. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that we rule it out, because there could be a benefit to, to getting people there,
Yeah, and there are some pretty
Permit-based
specific
thing?
guidelines and rules around that. In terms of who can get a special one-time limited permit and things like that. So I would say before we really get into a deep discussion about it, we should just like pull what's actually able to legally be done and not. I'm pretty sure that a food truck can't get a alcohol permit because you generally have to be like a nonprofit to do like a fundraiser unless you're having a full permit that you have like a place of business that's always in the same place. But yeah, I think it's definitely something I agree, Walt, to look at what other municipalities are doing, how they're using it, and what legally we can do. And
Yeah. From a permit perspective, ideally we kind of follow what is it the neighboring jurisdiction is Woodfin out of the other jurisdictions that require permits for alcohol sales? Or is Woodfin under the same requirements, to get a permit if alcohol is going to be served? Is it a county perspective? Or is there really no rules right now?
So on county property, the way that the ordinance is written, and it probably needs to be updated, the director of the Parks and Recreation Department can approve any alcohol permits, but then it goes to the ABC board in North Carolina, which has some strict rules around it can only be for this amount of time. It can be, you have to have like a nonprofit or an entity who is signing off on it. City of Asheville is pretty standard. I mean, I think that they're pretty standard across the board. I'm sure the YMCA has gotten, limited permits before, and that's what I'm sure that they've done also for those Greenway Blue Way fundraisers.
So as long as, is there a permit process to be followed within that jurisdiction, within the parks, the Riverside Park, for example? Is there currently a permit process to follow? And if so, that could be the policy that, the permit process is followed versus reinventing the wheel.
I mean, Woodfin may already have something, but it would be Woodfin's jurisdiction if they want to do anything above and beyond what the state of North Carolina requires. And I would assume that they probably, if they do have a policy, that it currently probably is left up either to the discretion of the town administrator to say, yes, you can apply for that, or that it goes to a vote of the full alderman. I think the only thing that has to go to like county commission is if there's fireworks or something like that, because that's a pyrotechnic thing. So even with inside jurisdictions, they still have to approve that. But with alcohol, like I know Asheville has a different one from Buncombe County in terms of like on county property and stuff like that.
So the potentially what we would recommend to meet Walt's request is that a permit process be developed, if not already.
Yeah, because like when the Downtown Association has Downtown After 5 in Asheville, they have a permit to use that space from the city, but then the actual like special event permit for vending beer and wine is actually from like the state ABC board.
Okay.
Ryan, would you be able to research if the town already has an ordinance or something that addresses that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, because I mean, that makes it, sort of a moot point, or at least from my perspective, if the policy is already in place. Obviously what I'm looking at is trying to figure out, if the town needs policies on something and do not have them right now, then, now might be a good time to put some thought into it. Okay, and there has been, I think Ann and several other people have raised the desirability of walking access into the parks. And Jerry signed Woodfin up as part of the 10-minute walk pledge. And it's listed on the 10minutewalk.org site. Yet, as I'm not sure what's involved in that. But it seems like to the extent that it is, that the parks are associated with it, that it's, once again, it's something that we should try to give some thought to. It may be an issue that we can't do anything about, or, you know, that is well into the future. But we were just accumulating all of these issues on this for future discussion. And now seemed like, to me, like an opportunity to at least review them and figure out if addressing them now is applicable. And I guess I would put in the same vein, the comprehensive parks plan. You know, that again may be something that that we want to wait on. But I just didn't want these things to be buried down at the bottom. You know, it was something that we decided, okay, we're not going to talk about it right now. We're going to talk about it in the future. I just want to, you know, remind everybody that, you know, we're marching towards the future. Okay, with that, Luke, you want to give us the project updates?
Sure. All right. You've already seen half of this, so I'll try to, and we've talked about half of it, so I'll kind of skip around here. We talked about Grand Rapids and lessons learned. Fundraising team, I think we're getting to the part where Eric's a part of that, or will be a part of that with Lisa and some others, building a plan. I think we're at the stage where there's an opportunity to start including or going after institutional donors. There's also TDA, potentially Dogwood, maybe even more on the MPO side. So I mentioned that because as I get down, I'll talk about Silverline with pictures, so I'll skip that. And we've already talked about the building. So now we're over to Riverside Park and the Wave. So right now I'm currently reviewing the cost estimate to help build a budget bridge to understand the elements that make up the difference. So I've received the estimate right now. Because of the forum, I'm going to just go high level right now. We're looking about 60% greater. But when you look at started doing some analysis, and I want to kind of set the path forward of my thoughts and get your opinions. You know, if you look at something, this estimate, the master plan was in 2017. Well, we're constructing in 2023. So year over year escalation plays into that. And then you layer on the past 2 years of COVID cost increases. So that's why I'm building, I need time to build that budget bridge to kind of explain where we were before, where we are now. So my current plan would be to meet with the PM subcommittee, kind of do a deeper dive on the numbers, bring that back to the planning group, and then hopefully, so that's month 1, month 2, and then following that, get a recommendation from you and then take it to the Board of Commissioners for budget amendment. Part of what happened last month is S2O was communicating with the floodplain administrator, and he actually wants us to do a clomer. And so I know what that, looking into that, so if you have to go clomer, then that's just one step prior to doing the loamer. So it's letter of map revision. So with that, it requires probably, it's like 32,000 additional engineering fees plus an additional like $15,000 in permit fees. So in essence, $52,000 more to go this, because we have to go this route. We're currently getting additional survey work for the modeling that's required for that. That's where we are with that. So steadily moving on, kind of going into, let me move over here. So now you can kind of see, I just threw some pictures up at paving. We've already kind of showed these. What they've done now is the surface course we're able to get it in prior to cold weather setting in, which is good. And we're really narrowing down the punch list items. I had this kind of put together for a different presentation. That's why I'm just throwing it up here. We've already talked about some of these things, but I look at that middle picture with the mud and the rocks, and I see a wonderful application. So when you go down there, and this, I want to highlight why it's so critical to have a good contractor, and that's one is Baker. I haven't even confirmed. I don't think those rocks were part of the plan, but they placed them strategically where that greenway is going to run through them. So now you've got, so you picture people backing down the ramp. Well, those rocks are placed in a way that aren't tripping hazards. They're fun, probably kids to play on, but they'll also keep trucks and vehicles from driving on the greenway. So anyway, I just, the way they did their work out there, they've done an excellent job for us. I mentioned we already completed the Boulder Wall. So I already got there. We're shaping up. You're seeing a lot of dirt and grass. You know, it kind of looks a little rough, but we're right at 95%. Depending on, you know, it'd be in the next month or two to complete. Part of that's weather dependent. And we don't want to do, we're waiting for the final construction of the pirate ship playground before we move into and do the final course of asphalt. And when we do that, you kind of over here, you can kind of see a little bit, there's a little bit of smoothness there. That's where the greenway, the portion of the greenway will be paved. So once they bring the equipment back in, they'll just pave that all at once. Since we're going into winter, I suspect it'll probably be March before we get there. But that doesn't preclude us from letting people utilize the space. You know, they can go out and play in them. So it's very positive to see upward construction on this pirate ship. Kind of talked about a little bit already. I still don't have a deadline on the mast. They can't go beyond that first, or I guess that elevated floor, because it'll close it in and then they can build up. So they're going to do as much as they can. And I haven't received an estimate on that, and then from there, if you recall the plans, half of this will be kind of a pea gravel surface, and then the other half will be this undulating play surface. So it's getting there. We already talked about the silver line building, and I think that's it. That's not for you guys. We're also going to be doing some paving and woofing. Let me look at this agenda, make sure I grabbed everything. Any questions on that?
How about money? How about the funding?
That's, you mean the pro forma, or
Well, I mean,
what specifically?
we're still behind the curve by, you know, several $1 million, and I wasn't clear if you know, who would, you know, how have there been any meetings or any discussions about you know, raising that money?
I think we're at the stage where yes, there have been. There's a different kind of, I don't know, I'm gonna use the wrong word, executive team. There's Eric, Lisa, and one other person that will be kind of engaged on the fundraising. I think that, and speaking with Eric, I think there's some confidence that I'm hearing from him that we can overcome the hurdle. We're gonna have a bigger hurdle, and I'll dig into be able to explain why, but I think a lot of it's gonna be, I'm jumping ahead if I start to guess, but I'll be able to explain where the cost delta is. And then so tie that into fundraising. Once we have that will give us a target to go after with, you know, institutional donors, or the whole fundraising side of this thing. I'll give them a game plan, or not a game plan. I'll give them a target, and then they will develop the game plan. Sorry.
Okay, so for Riverside you're going to let us know by next month or at next month's meeting.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else. Does anybody else? Okay. Thank you all for your time. We'll look forward to getting the notes up on the website. So we've got a record, Brian, for the comments that you shared with us. And we'll see you next month.
Thank you
Have a
all.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Thank you all.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.